You're locked into Inception Radio Network, Superior, Wisconsin.
Welcome to Just Energy Radio with your host, naturopath and medical intuitive, Dr. Rita Louise. We have learned from Einstein's theory that matter and energy are one. Physicists believe that all systems in nature have their own particular way of vibrating. From the swinging of a pendulum to the waves of the ocean to the light that brightens the sky each day, each of these oscillates at its own unique rate. The same holds true for every thought, feeling, event, or word we speak. Each has its own frequency or rate of vibration. What many of us don't realize is when we take everything in our universe down to its simplest form, it is all just energy. Join Dr. Rita Louise on a journey through time and space where past, present, and future collide. Today, what you believe may be called into question. What we want to know is, who made up the rules? Be brave and step outside the box. We are about to turn our world upside down and venture into the unknown. Hold on. We are departing our own beliefs and entering alternative realms. Enjoy the possibilities.
Hello and welcome to Just Energy Radio. I'm your host, Dr. Rita Louise, and thank you all for tuning into the show today. We have a great show lined up. In the first hour, we're going to be speaking with Dr. Maria Nilsson and John Ward about their new discovery in Gebel El Sisila. And in the second hour, we're going to be speaking with Carmen Boulter about some new discoveries on the Giza Plateau. So an exciting show today. Just Energy Radio is brought to you by soulhealer.com, where you can find out about all the products and services I offer, including medical intuition evaluations, energy healings, and psychic readings. So if there's stuff going on in your life, give me a call, send me an email, and we can set up a time for a private consultation. It's also brought to you by the Institute of Applied Energetics. That's www.appliedenergeticsinstitute.com, where you can jumpstart your intuition today by downloading their free 50-page guide. That's www.appliedenergeticsinstitute.com. And if you haven't gotten a copy of my new movie, Icon, Deconstructing the Archetypes of the Ancients, it's still only $1.99 by digital download on Amazon.com. And I've also been putting up some of my video shorts on there. So if you've been interested in some of the other work that I've been doing, they are also available on Amazon.com for digital download. $1.99. Can't beat it. You can't even buy a cup of Starbucks coffee for that much. Anyway, let me tell you about this hour's guests, and we will bring them on the air. Dr. Maria Nilsson is an archaeologist and mission director at Gebel El Sisila Epigraphic Survey Project. Following the formal debate in defense of her doctoral thesis on Hellenistic Queen Arsinoe II's crown at Gothenburg University, Maria now focuses her research on the relatively new topic pseudo-script, primarily Ptolemaic and Roman quarry marks at Gebel El Sisila, Egypt. That research has now led her and John to the new discovery of the lost Temple of Kanu at Gebel El Sisila, where with John and her phenomenal team, they're continuing to make discoveries and expanding the preservation of the site and its antiquities. John Ward is an ancient historian, archaeologist, explorer, adventurer, author, professional dowser, radio host, and father, residing in Luxor, Egypt. Having published, presented, lectured, and given workshops on numerous articles and papers concerning his research, John has conducted innumerable investigations pertaining to ancient Egyptian architecture and symbolism, while also carrying out research into the many mysteries surrounding medieval Templarism and esoteric, hermetic, and alchemical teachings, and innumerable other subjects associated with ancient symbolism. Their website is friendsofsicila.com, so please welcome Dr. Maria Nilsson and John Ward. Hey guys, how are you?
Hello.
Thank you so much for a wonderful introduction, Rita.
And I even didn't make too many mistakes, which is always great.
And what was the name of the queen that Maria studied for most of her adult life?
That was Hatshepsut, right?
Don't worry, John just calls her Arcee.
You said assy? No.
Exactly. There's been many jokes back and forwards on that one. Bless her, queen.
Well, I've never heard of her, but you don't really hear about Egyptian queens except for one or two here or there, which I think is very interesting.
Well, the great thing is that with the book and that it reached, it made world news within just a couple of days after the thesis was released. She actually become on an equal status with Queen Hatshepsut that most people know of. So it's quite a nice thing, actually.
In all practicality, she became a pharaoh. So.
Yes.
Oh, interesting. Well, I think it's interesting because if she was Hellenistic, that would put her around the time of Cleopatra. So was she related to Cleopatra?
Absolutely. She's the same dynasty. And much of what Cleopatra did was because of My Queenie and all the iconography or what you call the image, the details in the images, that's based on My Queen. So there's a lot of continuity in Cleopatra later.
Interesting. We're going to talk today about your new discovery at Gebel El Sisila. But as a way of introduction, John, you were on the show before, so you got to kind of talk a little bit about yourself. And I'm going to say a microscopic amount about yourself. But working as an archaeologist in Egypt or an would you guys consider yourselves Egyptologists?
It's a definition question that many actually continue to debate today, because some they suggest that you have to be able to read professionally hieroglyphs and be taught in the art of the hieroglyphs, while others say that all archaeologists working in Egypt, they should by definition be called an Egyptologist. Now, I worked a bit with hieroglyphs in my thesis, the later the Greek and Roman hieroglyphs, so it's not the nice and proper academic hieroglyphs, but fair dues, I know some of it. But we are working as archaeologists in Egypt, so sure, Egyptologist, archaeologist, doesn't matter. Archaeologist working in Egypt, fair enough.
Okay. How did you chance upon the opportunity to work there? I don't know that I've ever even asked you that, John, either. I think for a lot of people, all right, for me, going to be able to dig around in the sand and find cool stuff was like a dream when I was a kid. How did you guys manage to be able to do it for a career?
Well, you should get yourself a box of Kleenex tissues first, because it's such a romantic, weepy story. It's full of woe, romanticism, tidal waves.
Well, it might be so for you, but for me, it's all hard work.
And sweat. That's what the Kleenex are for, right?
What, as Rita said, I'm always on the show and I'm always bleating along. So why didn't you tell them?
Well,
share the story.
There is a romantic side to the story, but what most people forget and don't see is actually all the hard work that's behind it. It's not just to go and take a brush to the sand and remove a bit and whoops, there you found a treasure. It's so much more than that. And I mean, we spend 2 to 3 months a year just finding funding to be out there. And of course, that's time that we rather spend on researching and getting the material out to the public. But that's the reality of the profession. But there is a romantic side to it. And for me personally, I always knew since I was a kid what I wanted to do, and I always wanted to go to Egypt. So it was really just a matter of following the educational rules and getting a doctorate and then moving on from that. And it was while I was studying as a doctoral student that I met John in Aswan, and It was actually by chance that we stopped at Gebel Silsila because
You make it sound so boring and so academic. I mean, there we were. We met across that wonderful chaise longue in that amazing 10-star hotel with the cockroaches and the one man that doubled up as the receptionist, the waiter, the bagman.
Did I mention that I was a doctoral student at the time and had no money, so we had to stay.
It wasn't a case of no money. You were just so tight.
So
tight. You chose the worst hotel in the whole of Upper Egypt for us to stay in.
Actually,
bearing in mind, Rita, I had never met this girl before. All we'd had was conversations over emails. We hadn't even Skyped each other. And this is going back now 8 years?
Yeah.
8 years.
Yeah.
And she basically turned around and her question was, the brief for me, because at that time I had my own tour company in Egypt, the brief for me was to facilitate. Maria's request was to be at each temple for more than an hour and preferably a day.
Well, the reason why I had to contact John was because at the time we had a convoy system in Egypt. So you couldn't just drive down to a temple and stay there all day. You were actually locked to.
You were duty bound to stay with the convoy. So you were able to stay at the temple sites for 1 hour and then back onto the coach and onto the next temple. And that's how the convoy system worked in Upper Egypt.
And of course, that wasn't enough for me.
No. So I had to devise a plan in which she could spend an entire day. And the only way we could do it on a shoestring, because she was so tight, was that to hire a little tiny sailing boat, what we call a felucca in Egypt. And it's literally a four-man boat, really, with a main sail.
No toilet.
No toilet. No TV.
I don't know. I kind of draw the line of no toilet.
It has a view.
Yes.
It had a view.
Yeah.
You didn't have a cabin. We all slept on the same deck. Yep. And we sailed the Nile. And our felucca captain, we'd done the stops at the other temples, and he was coming round the bend, and he said, there's Pharaoni henna, meaning there's pharaonic here, a pharaonic site. And do you want to stop? And Maria looked at me, I looked at Maria, I said, well, we got tired, why not? And we stopped and we pulled up on the west bank of Silsila at that time, and Julie paid our tickets. And no, we didn't have to pay for tickets.
No, we didn't have to pay for tickets.
We had our passes then.
Archeological passes, that's the beauty.
That's it. And then we walked the banks. And you take it from there, darling.
Well, we stepped into the temple that is known as the Spears of Horemheb, which, by the way, we have changed the chronology for that, so we shouldn't be calling it that anymore.
Not the Spears of
Horemheb,
no.
Nevertheless, a rock-cut temple. And we walked in there and we looked at it, and it was all nice, typical pharaonic. Yeah. We stepped outside and and it was actually on the back side of that rock-cut temple that we both stood fascinated in front of a series of symbols that had been carved into one of the quarry faces. And for different reasons, we both started to jump up and down in joy. And we kind of looked at each other, bemused by the other's reaction. And we realized that there was something more there to be seen. And ever since then, I mean, we gave the site a promise that we would return and we would try to study these symbols in more detail, and that we would make justice to the site, and that people finally would get to know the site of Gebel Silsila, and that was 8 years ago. So it's quite fantastic to stand on site and know that we kept our promise. And I mean, since then we catalogued over 5,000 of these sacred quarry marks, and we broke much of the code that surround them. So soon we're hoping that the first book on them will come out, and there's been a series of articles as well, but we're hoping that the book will soon be out.
Exciting. Where in Egypt is Gebel El Silsila?
Well, it's between the more famous cities of Luxor and Aswan, so about 130 kilometers. It doesn't say anything.
It's midway between the ancient sites of Edfu and Komombo. They're the two main sites that most people will know who they've been to Egypt. But if you bring up Google Earth and pinpoint those two sites, just type in Edfu or Komombo, and you'll bring those sites up on Google Earth, and you'll see a little narrow stretch of the Nile. And you'll see two land masses either side of the Nile where it becomes really, really thin. It's very, very narrow. And that's the narrowest point of the Nile for the whole stretch of the Nile, in fact, from Ethiopia all the way down to the Mediterranean. This is the narrowest it ever gets. And that's our site, Silsila. And it stretches, as I say, both the East Bank and the West Bank. Maria is in charge, really. And we have one of the largest archaeological sites in the whole of Egypt. It is truly massive site, spanning, as I say,
we
both
got
the East
30
Bank,
square kilometers.
30 square kilometers, which is just over 12 miles squared.
Wow.
It's huge. And we've walked it all.
Almost.
Well, you were saying that it was had been a quarry. Was this quarry used to get stones like granite that were, you hear the stories that they quarried them at Aswan and then put them on a barge and then sent them up the Nile. So was this one of the quarries that are referred to?
Yes. I mean,
it's almost the same story, but we got sandstone instead of granite, which is a much softer stone. But it's basically our site is the physical mother of all the famous temples in Egypt. So Karnak and Luxor Temple, the Ramesseum, all of them, they have stone that originates in Gebel Silsila.
Any idea how long this site was in use?
Well, it depends on what you mean in use, because
they were quarrying it, I guess. I don't know. Go ahead.
We got evidence of since at least 1500 BC, but we got activity on site that goes back at least 10,000 years.
Just from people living there?
Yes, living and visiting, just passing by, because obviously the early visitors to the site, they were nomadic, so they wouldn't put a proper foot down, so to say.
One of the things to bear in mind here, Rita, is that, as I said before, both the East and West Bank are like islands, for want of a better word. When the Nile was in flood season, both the East Bank and West Bank would become these virtual islands in the floodplain. So you can imagine every single living thing, anything that slithers and slimes and crawls or walks, would make its way to these two islands for safety from the floodwaters. Now, what Maria is referring to, where we can take back to 10,000 years, is mostly the rock art, where we've got depictions of various scenes of hunter-gatherers, geometric patterns, and other such like, which is strewn across the entire site.
But we also got the flint tools.
And the flint tools and the microlithic tools and so forth. So it is a virtual, there's evidence of virtual industries there, where Maria's quite rightly saying, the nomadic tribes would come in, they would do their hunting and gathering, they would probably fish or hunt, and then leave the site afterwards when the floodwaters actually went down. So it's an amazing site itself.
The rock art, the really old, that's what I'm interested in, the really old rock art that you have found from a stylistic or an iconographical point of view, does it resemble more art that you would find in South Africa, Ethiopia, or more what you would find in I guess it would be the central continent, by Nap the Playa, kind of out, have to think.
Yeah. It depends on what period you're looking at, because the further back we go, we got rock art from a period that's called the Epipaleolithic, which is about 8,500 years ago. And during that time, the motifs that they made, it's very difficult for us today to actually answer what they depict, because they haven't got a firm shape. There's a lot of geometrical patterns, curvilinear types, ladders, and so forth. And there's been attempts to try to determine what they depict, but it's a very dangerous path to go down. But then when you come down towards the pre-dynastics, which is about 6,000 years ago, then we have something that's called the Ethiopian fauna, which is depictions of giraffes, hippopotami, crocodiles, and so forth. So it really depends on what period you're looking at. But it's personally, I find the Epipaleolithic, the older motifs, much more interesting because they are embedded in this mystery.
Well, and it just seems very consistent that prior to 5 or 6,000 BC, representational art just wasn't happening all that much, globally speaking. And we did find a lot more of the geometric type patterns that nobody understands, and people even contest whether it's even art.
Well, it is art. I believe that it is art, but then again, you can ask if graffiti is art, and some of the modern creations are art as well. It's in the eye of the beholder, isn't it? But I think that you shouldn't exclude that from art when you include so much else in it, regardless of the connotations that come with it, with religion and so forth, or if you believe that it has a protective force and so forth. Regardless of that, it's still a creation by someone who believed that it was important enough to save for the afterward world.
And it's a means of communication. I mean, that's what
it is.
We've got sites at Sicily, Rita, where you can literally you're walking along the desert plain, and you don't exactly stumble upon them, but they're just laying there still. These lovely rock formations, which that are adorned with this graffiti and this rock art, and you've got to bear in mind the landscape hasn't changed. It hasn't changed in over 6,000 years, 8,000 years, 10,000 years. These places where we've got the microlithic sites, where we've got these little shards of flints, where the nappings, the small, very microlithic nappings, hence the reason why microlithic workshops, they're just laying there. So, and you can see where the man would have sat because he's surrounded by, in a kind of circular fashion, these nappings. And so you can tell that nothing's changed on the landscape itself in over 10,000 years. And so when you look at the rock art that's in the same kind of situ, in the same kind of environment, you've got to say to yourself, well, what was his means? What was he trying to communicate to his fellow man or woman? Were they there as a tribe? Were they there as a group? Or was he there as an individual, and was someone else going to come by and look at his motif and think, oh, and then interpret what he had actually knocked into the stone itself using another stone? It really is open to interpretation.
But in the end of the day, the nice thing about all our representations, regardless of their age, if we accept now the oldest part that we can't determine, is that there are some motifs that continue throughout. We got boats, and we got certain depictions of animals, certain people, and so forth. So there are elements in the natural surrounding that would have had such an impact on the people that they wanted to express some form of belonging to that.
Coneheads,
Yes.
Coneheads.
Coneheads.
I'm going to go, okay, so are there elongated skulls there? Why conehead?
It's an ongoing debate between us and other scholars that have been to the site.
No, actually, there is a discussion among prehistoric experts who look at rock art from the Epipaleolithic period, and there is a certain form of representation that some believe could represent an early form of a human. And possibly that they are depicted with something that could represent the white crown, which is one of Egypt's crowns, and they, as John say, they look like cone heads,
or a crocodile. If you look at it from a different perspective.
Yes, well, so you say.
I think it's a crocodile.
Well, and one of the things that I believe personally is that when our ancestors created, and I'm going to say figurative art, whether it's, a geometric pattern or a giraffe, there was a much deeper intrinsic meaning that today we don't get. And with that meaning, there was a whole story that went along with it.
Oh, exactly.
But it's also because today we're so keen on putting everything in folders and separating things, while for the ancients everything was connected. They didn't separate religion from everyday life. For them, religion was everything. Everything in nature had a religious part, and they were just one among the others within one big sphere. So for them there was no difference, and I think that's the problem we got today. We got too disorientated in our wish to fold everything up.
Yeah.
I'm going to switch gears here a little bit. Recently, you guys announced news of a new discovery at Gebel El Sicila. Is that the whole? I mean, is that the proper way to say the whole thing, or is Sicila the actual name, like the Gebel El? Is that what does that mean?
Gebel is mountain. El is the. Silsila means chain.
Right.
So it's the mountain of the chain, basically, in Arabic, if you were to translate it into English. So basically, it's the mountain. The Gebel El, the mountain, Silsila, chain. But you can just call it Silsila.
Okay. So what did you guys find?
Can't tell you.
I mean, because I know it's not a secret, because when I talked to you last time, John, it was a secret. And now the secret's going to be revealed.
Shh. Go for it, Maria.
It's the big reveal.
Your big discovery. Go ahead.
It was our big discovery.
Of course it was.
Our big discovery. Basically, what we've done is following an old map, which we rediscovered in the archives of the EES, which is the Egyptian Exploration Society in London, and working from another map that we'd also seen within the previous journals, which was usually it says X marks the spot usually, but in this case it was the letter T. T marked the spot.
T marked temple.
T marked temple, yeah. And so we use this map to try and configure exactly where in Sicily this temple, so-called temple, was going to be.
Well, the fact is that throughout research, everyone who's visited Silsila before us, there's been mentioning of a supposed temple of Ramses II, and no one is really going out with the location of such.
Well, I think it's fair to say when you say everyone,
well,
everyone who's ever written about Sicily has repeated what was originally written. So even if they hadn't even seen it, they still mention it as if they had seen it, but they hadn't.
Yes.
I mean, really and truly, only one person probably, or two people, have actually ever really seen.
Yes.
And that was probably like in the mid 1800s, right?
Well, it's even earlier. Yeah, it was in the very beginning of the 18th century, and it's ridiculous that it's just 19th century. Sorry, even though it's just continued from there. People have just regurgitated the same material, and it wasn't until, as Maria was about to say, until we started going through the literature and started going through the archives, and then we put all that together. And then when we were on site, the very, very first morning, it was actually quite secret. We got up, we're all ready, we're all bushy-eyed and bright-tailed. We're on our dahabir. We know exactly what we're going to do. We're going to go and find the long-lost Temple of Keni. And we get all our equipment. We're all on the boat. The dog's on the boat. Freya is on the deck waving to us from the deck with Susie, her nanny. And we're there. And the engine, he's pulling the cord on the engine, the outboard motor to get it going. And it's kind of going plop, 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 plop. And the bloody thing wouldn't start. And so it was, we had to basically get everything off the boat and choose a different location. When we actually went back up to a place which we call Pottery Hill, which is another little area, which is a series of stone huts set out in a circular formation. And we cleaned the areas there and had a look at that for a couple of days while we had the engine repaired. And as soon as the engine was repaired, we then got everything back on the boat, and then we rushed over to the East Bank.
And we found it.
And we found the temple. First of all, protruding from the sands, we saw the foundations of the 3 columns that were just protruding out of the dust, kind of thing.
Now, we have to admit to ourselves.
And you didn't notice it before?
No, that's what I was just about to say. We have to admit that it's quite embarrassing that we haven't seen it before, because we passed that area so many times.
Probably more times we've had hot dinners.
Yes.
And everybody else.
Yes. Of course.
Because it's on the main road actually into Silsila.
And they're actually planning to make a car park there. So
Well, the thing was that we discovered it. We made the announcement. We rang the inspectorate in Komombo and in Aswan to our bosses basically and said, look, we found it, XYZ, and we're all jumping up and down. And they turned around, one of the inspectors who was with us, and said, well, this specific area, no. We want to turn this into a car park. We said no.
But of course, his bosses, they quite soon stopped all plans of doing so.
Everything was stopped, and they gave us permission to continue with the cleaning procedures. And we basically spent the remaining of the season cleaning back barrel loads of sand and dirt and stone and other bits of debris. As we revealed what was left of the foundations. Now, you've got to remember here, and it's a little bit difficult to kind of envisage, but if you can imagine a bedrock surface, parts of it has been pre-dressed to receive the new flooring, so to speak. Parts of it have been dressed that resemble the bases of the columns. Some areas have been dressed which would then outline the internal or external walls of the temple structure itself. But as for block work, all of that had actually been quarried away. The Romans, we presume, given the amount of pottery that we had there as evidence for that, were the ones who actually quarried the remains of the temple away and took it to a different location. Whether
or
they
just used it as
a spoil, but they may have even taken the temple as itself and really just relocated it, and that's something that we want to look into over the coming years.
That's your thing.
That's my positivistic thinking, and I'm allowed to have that. So be quiet.
Mm-hmm.
And but during that process of cleaning back, of course, we were pulling out of the sand, basically, literally pulling out the sand, the cartouches of Ramesses II, the cartouches of Amenhotep III, limestone fragments with beautiful tuff-mosaic type of relief on them, which was totally exquisite.
And that this
scarabs.
Hold on, because what you're saying now is actually quite important, because everyone who mentioned this temple before, they say there was a destroyed temple of Ramses II, and of course we now have the cartouches and iconography that predate that quite far. So we take it back for several generations, and we can present 4 or 5 chronological phases rather than just the Temple of Ramses. So that in itself is fantastic.
I think one of the important things here is the excitement that we've got the transition there, Rita, between limestone and sandstone, and this is something that it's been talked about before. And of course, if you go to places like Karnak or Luxor Temple or the Ramesseum, Medina Habu, there you will see within the foundation deposits other remnants of previous temples that were there, that once stood there previous to the temple that's there today.
What John is trying to say is that during the Middle Kingdom and up towards the 18th dynasty, everyone almost built their temples in either mud brick or in limestone.
Except for Mentuhotep.
Yes. But after the 18th dynasty, there is this very clear change where they start to build everything in sandstone, and all the temples that we have from that period in Upper Egypt, they have beautiful, strong sandstone from Silsila. So what we're looking at on site is we actually have the limestone foundation of an original temple from the early 18th dynasty, and then a continuation into sandstone, where we're looking at the possibility of having not only a change in the style, but actually possibly we might have stumbled upon one of the reasons why it changed. So they might have built a temple in limestone and realized how easy it was to work in the sandstone, and realized the capability.
I think they realized that the two architectural components can go together quite well, and that you can use
Yes, but also
sandstone
what has
as
happened
limestone.
at Gebel Silsila, they realized the potential of the site, and after that, we like to see it as a bridge. That the building of the limestone temple at Gebel Silsila offered a bridge into the sandstone.
What you're saying, let me just clarify, is that because of the construction of the temple, that's when they discovered that sandstone was an easier material to work with, and then they started quarrying it there. Would that be a correct statement?
Well, I mean, what you've got to look at, Rita, is that Gebel Silsila itself, previously, during the Pharaonic period, there was something that we also discovered late last year as well, was that there's a land bridge between the East Bank and the West Bank. Now, that land bridge, we kind of assuming, it's an hypothesis that we're working with in conjunction with Professor Jim Harold from Toledo University, who's our geologist on site. Amazing man, by the way. A master of masters and a beautiful man. We love him to bits.
Yes.
Apart from that, but what we're looking at is a land bridge, which could have been possibly what we refer to in Egypt as a cataract, what you would refer to as a waterfall, really. It was a place which would have blocked the water, the flow of the Nile. And remember that both the East Bank and West Bank were or are islands during the inundation. So you've got the part of the Nile here that is completely unnavigable. You wouldn't have been able to pass a boat through that narrow gorge. And so during the flood season, boats would be able to circumnavigate the islands around them and then continue southwards up the Nile. But during the low season, when the Nile was at its lowest point, the gorge would turn into a cataract, making it totally impassable. And of course, the Nile would no longer be circumnavigating these two islands. And so therefore, it would be cut off from the rest of Egypt. You wouldn't be able to navigate that part of the Nile. That being said, then, we were looking then at a possible beginning of the site as a place of worship or a place, a settlement, i.e. Keni or Kenu, depending on how you want to translate that or even pronounce it. And so we've got, first of all, at this present moment, what we've got evidence for is this limestone temple. I'd like to say that we may have something before, but we don't have that yet. So at the moment, we've got a limestone temple that is datable to around about 1500 BC, thereabouts, 18th dynasty. We've then got the usurpation of that limestone temple by the later pharaohs of, let's say, the house of Amenhotep. We then have that sandstone, and this is where it becomes very important, because the sandstone block or fragment that we pulled out, which has the cartouche of Amenhotep III. Now, he was the grandfather of Tutankhamun, the father of Akhenaten, which all your audience are probably familiar with. That fragment is very, very important and is unique, according to Dr. Philippe Martinez, our Egyptologist, our epigrapher on site. Now, Philippe has got over 30 years worth of experience in epigraphy and researching and literally staring at tons of stone fragments. And what it is that this particular stone fragment has been usurped. And so what has happened here is Amenhotep III has actually erased the previous name on the sandstone block. So it proves that there was a pharaoh already using sandstone prior to Amenhotep III and after the Thutmose period. So we've got somebody in between. So we do have another pharaoh there. So we do have another transitional period to look at. And then, of course, we then go into the time of Ramesses II and so forth.
To answer your question and go back to that, the transition is also because what we have on the West Bank is a series of false tombs or cenotaphs, shrines that have been cut straight into the rock. Now, there's 32 of them recorded so far, and they all belong to the period of Queen Hatshepsut and Thutmose III. And we now have evidence that the rock cut temple on the other side is most likely of that period as well. So we believe that, as you said, that while they were working with this limestone temple, they realized how easy it was to work with the sandstone, and we may have there the starting point for it.
Well, that would be a huge find. I mean, especially if what you're saying about there being this, I'm going to say, huge cultural shift, huge building material shift that happened from, the Middle Kingdom to the Late Kingdom in going from limestone to sandstone, then this would be kind of potentially the birthplace.
So yes, it was basically the transition between limestone and sandstone. You are correct.
A catalyst.
A catalyst. You are correct, the Rita, and it does have huge, not only historical importance, but cultural importance as well, as far as Egyptological research is concerned. And
we're very much looking forward to returning in the autumn or winter. There's many questions still unanswered, and
still a lot to clean back. I mean,
there is.
Another thing that Professor Jim Howard was able to pinpoint for us and to kind of show to us was that the temple sits on what would have been an outcrop. So again, we've got this use of the Nile as a boundary. It would have been an island itself, cut off from the rest of Silsila possibly.
And that's something that our 3D digital team is working on and hoping to reconstruct in terms of a short video to show how the Nile rose up towards the temple and flooded around it.
And I will say this now, just a shameless plug. I will be bringing some of this material with me to the Paradigm Symposium this October. So especially the 3D imagery.
Ooh, excellent.
So that would be fantastic to show to the audience and the attendees of the conference. I'm looking forward to that.
Are you going to be there, Maria?
We'll see.
Okay, but say yes, because then we can hang out. Girl power, come on. There's only so many of us going to be there.
It all depends on funding, It's time is precious, and it all depends on. Unfortunately, it depends on the monetary situation.
No. Unfortunately, given our circumstances and given the financial circumstances of Europe at the present moment, we're plowing everything we have personally wise into Silsila, and we continue, and we have always done that, but we're continuing to do that. And as we, unfortunately or fortunately, depending on which way you look at this, the more we find, the more we need equipment wise, team wise, and all of that boils down to costs, I'm afraid. And so even though the site is providing us with these absolutely amazing discoveries, it costs us more each year because we need to increase our team and equipment to do so, to continue the work. So it is, and hence the reason why we started, actually, all seriousness, that's why we started the Friends of Silsila, where we hope to garner membership from like-minded people who are interested in the site, who want to continue with the preservation and the
and even have the possibility to join as volunteer.
And join as a volunteer on site and put their fingers and their hands into the sands of time, so to speak, and rip forth some wonderful historical artifacts.
Or if there's just someone who is wealthy and happy to support us, I mean, that's fine, that too.
We're looking for the next Lord Carnarvon. You want to fill those boots, Rita?
Sure. Will you take $1?
Yes, we will. Many dollars will make light work.
Well, see, then you could be a dollionaire. I'm a dollionaire.
Every dollar counts. Every dollar counts. We are serious there.
But let me ask you. I mean, you made a comment about volunteers. I know that, like at the Bosnian Pyramid, they have people that come and volunteer to help dig and explore. And I know that there are a lot of places that you can go and work for free and pay all of your own expenses, but you have to like sign up for a college course or do all of this jumping through hoops before you can do anything. Will what you're doing be set up the same way, or will it be a little more open to just regular people to come and
Our program will allow members of the Friends of Silsila to have the opportunity to join as a volunteer. The only thing that we need to sort out is that we need documentation, so passports and a CV and so forth, just for the public records, to send in each year when we send in our renewable
The only hoops that we have to jump through, Rita, really are the security hoops that are put in place by the Egyptian Ministry for Antiquity, which is a good thing. I want to speak honestly there. So they don't just allow any Tom, Dick, or Harry to go on site and start digging around. So basically, our volunteer program through the Friends of Silsila will allow anyone, and I must stress that, anyone, regardless of their experience, to be on site with us and work as part of the team, cataloging, documenting, recording, photographing, cleaning and so forth on the site amongst us, living on the boat with us, and
of course under our supervision.
Under our supervision.
And guidance.
And guidance. And
but
as long as they make coffee.
Yes, of course.
Oh, well, then I'm totally screwed. So I guess they don't want people to take like statues and kind of put them in their, roll them up in their socks and put it in their luggage and take them home. I guess there's kind of, they would frown on that a little bit.
Yeah, we frown on that kind of activity.
I think we do more than that.
Yeah.
More than frown. Yeah.
Rats.
Put them up against and shoot them.
Yeah, not maybe not that. We can lock them in somewhere.
Feed them to the crocodiles.
Yes, put them down in Lake.
It's actually, all joking aside, I'd like to mention Shelby, who's going to be joining us this season, actually, this coming season. She's from America, and we met at the Paradigm Symposium 2012, in fact, when I first met you, Rita.
Well, excellent.
And she was a lovely young girl then with her father, and she had a very healthy interest in archaeology, and she's pursued that ever since. And she's worked, as far as I'm aware now, if I remember rightly, she's worked in South America and other places alongside various institutions. And through our friendship, through the Paradigm Symposium, and through a discourse with Maria as well, because Maria's kind of given us some pointers as in which direction to go career-wise in educational career, she's going to be joining us as a volunteer this coming season. So she's going to be with us, utilizing it. And that's the beauty of the Paradigm Symposium, if I may just again point that out, that it brings all these different people together and allows these things to happen. It is a bridge, as I've always said. There you go. That's enough for me.
Okay. Well, we're getting kind of close on time, but let me ask this question kind of as a pull it all together. How does the finding of this site, how do you think it's going to change history? Or
it already has.
Yes, it has.
It already has. I mean, first and foremost, what people need to know is that Gebel Silsila is not just a sandstone quarry. It is a sacred site. And I mean, we go out each morning and as Shelby will notice herself during the winter, is that I'm quite strict in my policy in how to greet the site each morning as we go out there. And it's always a military action saying, "Good morning, Madame Silsila," because the site is the mother of all the temples and she deserves some recognition. So we treat her like the lady she is. But no, the site needs to be recognized as a sacred site and not just a working place. And I think that for the modern person who hear the word quarry, they reflect upon it and associate it with a hard working environment of men. Now, there is so much more at Silsila, and finding the temple that was in use before they even started opening the large quarries there, that shows that it was a sacred site before it was quarried. So it's changed a lot of the history already. But we're working also on a lot of other details that unfortunately we can't share yet.
Okay, stay tuned for part 2.
Yes.
Okay. Is the quarry, because you mentioned that you had to go across the Nile to find the temple. So is the quarry on one side and then the temple on the other side?
No, we got temples and quarries on both sides of the Nile.
Okay. Where my mind is going is, if there is a temple, then that says there has to be a certain population base in order to support the temple. And John, you were saying earlier about how there was the rapids there and it wasn't really passable. So it seems conceivable to me that it could have been like a trade location, or, there was a big hotel there where people came and waited for the waters to rise.
You're actually picking up on something that is close to our hearts.
Well, we know that the site had its own governor. Yes. We know that it's been described as a town in papyrus and so forth. So it was a town of sort. But as far as the archaeological material can show, we only have small workers' villages so far. So it's one of the things that we're still looking for. Where is the town of Khenu? And of course, the best way to find an ancient city is to look where the small modern city is. And we got one of those in Nag el Hammam, an area just north of Silsila on the west bank, and it's quite likely that was the center of the town, and that's close to where we found also Middle Kingdom inscriptions with the name of the governor of Khenu. So yes, it definitely had some form of infrastructure that worked as a town or whatever.
Yes, most definitely.
Is that enclosed in your 12-mile chunk of land?
It does.
It does indeed.
So you can go dig around there anytime you want.
Pretty much, yes.
But see, to me, that's so exciting. I mean, people laugh at me, we have the house and I'll go out in the yard, and I mean, one piece of our lot, it was like a junk pile, I swear to God. And I'll take my little spade and my little 3-prong rake thing, and I'll start digging down. And I found 50 pounds of copper wire, and they were like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "It's my little archaeological expedition." So, I mean, I'm digging up this, but it ended up being 50 pounds. So it was treasures in my backyard. It's always good. Oh. But see, you have 12 miles to play with. And so much that no one even knows anything about. That's so exciting.
Can I just say square to that?
Square.
Yes.
Square miles.
Square. It's quite a large
area. It's huge if you think about that.
It is huge.
It is massive, and Maria does take us on what we call Maria's fun walks now and again, which are not fun. They last an entire day.
They are wonderful.
They're not wonderful. There's nothing fun about them. There's nothing wonderful about them. It's like torture.
But we always discover great things.
Yes, you do.
But she lets you have water, so it's all good.
Yes.
Only warm, hot, sticky water. That's been
Well, that's not by my choice. It's the weather.
Yes, I do actually have my creature comforts. I have my cup of coffee and my porcelain, my china cup that's carried for me.
Okay, by the servants on their head in a bag.
I carry everything myself, I may add.
I refuse to do that.
Yeah. But
so British.
I mean, I hope you don't fan them and feed them any grapes, Maria.
You got to be kidding me.
Maybe it's the other way around, which would be much better in my opinion.
I think it is the other way around. We did have a chaise longue in our cabin in the stateroom that we have in our dahaber, but Maria removed that and put that on deck and left us with it and put a cot there instead for little baby Freya, who joins us on site all seasons now. So it's a family affair now, and it is wonderful actually because the whole
Well,
team
not
is
to
like one
mention
big
that
family.
your daughter and son
Yes, they'll
will be joining us in the winter as well.
Yes.
So it will be even a bigger family affair.
I'm looking forward to it. It's going to be fantastic.
Wonderful. Guys, we need to go. Our time is up. Thank you so much.
Sorry.
This was wonderful, and I can't wait for some new excitement to come out that you can talk about, and we'll have you back on and get the update.
Well,
Sure.
hopefully we can do a show live from Sicily in our autumn season. We're going to be there from the 1st of November through to the 17th of December.
Well,
And then
that is definitely a possibility.
Yeah, and we can bring you live action
At 2:00 in the morning?
at 2:00. No, I don't think so.
Okay.
Well,
All right,
thank
guys,
you.
the music's going to come up, so I am going to let you go. Thank you again so much.
Thank you, Rita.
Thank you.
That's Dr. Maria Nilsson and John Ward. Their website is friendsofsicilla.com, so please do check it out. Support what they're doing because it is just so exciting. I'm Dr. Rita Louise. This is Just Energy Radio. We'll be back after these words from our sponsors. Hello and welcome back to Just Energy Radio. I'm your host, Dr. Rita Louise, and thank you all for staying tuned to this hour of the show. And again, we're going to be talking about another big discovery in Egypt. And to share that information with us, we're going to be talking with Carmen Boulter. And let me tell you a little bit about Carmen and just get her on the air because we don't have enough time. We're going to try to compress everything into an hour. Dr. Carmen Boulter has had an unshakable passion for Egypt, traveling there 25 times. And I think this bio is old and is probably way more than 25. Through embassy support, Carmen did extensive research in the archives of the Egyptian Museum, gaining official access to the rare books library of the Faculty of Archeology, Cairo University, where the field notes of excavations done around the pyramids in the early 1900s are held. Carmen is the author of Angels and Archetypes, an evolutionary map of the feminine consciousness. She is also the creative fire behind the Pyramid Codes, now on Netflix. She is the director, producer, and writer of the series. Over the past decade, Carmen has been a university professor developing online curriculum. Her latest achievement is InteractiveU.com, an online learning and social action network. But after this interview today, I think she might be busy doing a bunch of other stuff too. Her website, pyramidcode.com. Please welcome Dr. Carmen Boulter. Hey, Carmen, how are you?
I'm great. Nice to talk to you, Rita.
I'm just so glad to have you on. A couple of months ago, I had Klaus Donna on, and he was talking about this new technology, and then your name came up. And we were covering so much material. He just said, well, you know, we have these really interesting finds in Egypt, but I really can't talk about it. And then I found, then he mentioned your name, and then I heard that you had gone public with the information. It was like, I got to get Carmen on the show to find out what's going on, because I guess he wasn't really at liberty to give much detail at the time. So, Carmen, what did you guys find? I mean, hopefully not some ex-military base out in the middle of Egypt desert with a big X marks the spot thing in the center.
Well, that's what I found last time when I was looking for this place. And so, So I've been looking for this place for about 25 years, and I thought it was the Giza Plateau. And
all right, back up. What place? A place
that had very, very deep chambers. It comes from my past life memory, channeled sessions that I've done with other people, that there is a place that there was a lot of underground activity. It wasn't a residence. It's not like, living underground or any of that, but that it was huge. And in the time that I've been going to Egypt, now it's 29 times, I was running into people who were having memories of this place as well, without me mentioning it. And so I saw this thing in 1996 and at the Star Visions conference with Chelsea Floor, and it was a document that was basically describing the place, but it said the entrance was at the Giza Plateau. So I spent 5 years in and out of the holes, and then there was that expedition I led in February 2012 that ended up being the military leftovers of a target for the Air Force. And then someone sent me a link to this place called the Hawara Labyrinth, and the work had completely stopped on it in 2008. And I started digging around and realizing that Herodotus claims to have been in there and that there's 2 distinct levels, and they were saying 1,500 rooms per level. So I'm like, okay, this may be it. And the people who had done research in the past were using ground-penetrating radar by laying wires on the sand. And the limitation of that was it could go between 5 and 12 meters deep. And so they were finding anomalies. I'm not convinced they did their research correctly in that I teach graduate level research methods. And anyway, so the whole thing stopped. The revolution happened and nobody went back to it. And so with that site on the military base that I didn't realize, we went in with a hot air balloon. I actually was doing needle in a haystack because I had, on Google Earth, because I had seen the picture. And I found it. And I had the GPS coordinates. So with this other group, they had driven to Hawara, but they didn't have the GPS coordinates. So I spent 2 days just searching the area, and I found it based on ancient maps from Flinders Petrie in 1891. And so I replicated that on Google Earth. I ascertained that the pyramid was there, and I got the coordinates, and about 5 minutes later, Klaus Donna Skyped me. I said, Klaus, I think I found something. He said, send me the KMZ file from Google Earth. And 2 days later, he calls me and he says, earth-shattering, world-changing, oh my God. And so I've been working with the scans since, and I did calculations. I had the shapes of the rooms, the depth of the rooms, whether or not there was gold, water, which there isn't, pottery, which there isn't, and some rooms have bone and gold, both. And so I started calculating, and it turns out that the area above ground measures 81 football fields. It's 107 acres. And the depth is just about 60 feet, one level, 120 feet deep. So we're calling the red level the lower level and the blue level the upper level. It turns out that there's 32 chambers on one side, and on that side there's 1.5 kilometers of passageways. All of the chambers are bigger than the average size house. But 6 of them are bigger than Olympic-sized swimming pools.
That's huge.
Huge. This is like burying a number of airports. The chambers don't connect to one another, and so it doesn't seem like it could possibly have been a temple. Temple have the chambers that one leads to the next until you get to the far back, and it's the Holy of Holies. It's not like a tomb like Ramses II tomb that has like 72 chambers in it, and they go down, down, down. The 2 levels don't connect to one another. And there's a canal over the top, and the lower level for 800 meters is the shape of the canal. So someone knew what was down there when they put the canal in, and it was Louis de Belson, who was the one that built the Suez Canal. So there are layers, there are 4 distinct layers at the site, and in archaeology, older is deeper. So Flinders Petrie excavated the Roman level, and they found painted sarcophagi, and it was the first time they'd ever found a painting of the deceased face on the wooden sarcophagus, and they were all like that. That was a style they were establishing then. Then there's the Ptolemaic level, which is Antony and Cleopatra, and they excavated that. But no one has been able to get down to the lower levels. First of all, because they wouldn't have ever guessed that it's that deep. But because of the legends, and because Pliny and Strombo and Petrie and all these different people have been interested in the site, there's legends that go with it. And the people who talked about it from ancient times were at least living 600 years apart. So they weren't talking to each other. And so people kept going back there, and then they put the pyramid on top because it's a mud brick pyramid, and there's no way that that's going to be ancient in the way that this is ancient. And if you think older is deeper, that deep means it's got to be very, very, very old.
Well, but let me ask you, so you said that Petrie excavated part of it and found some Ptolemaic stuff in the painted sarcophagus. Was that just under sand and basically kind of laying on the surface, or was that actually dug into the bedrock like we find in the Valley of the Kings?
No. It was more on the surface, but as I keep saying, older is deeper. So the Ptolemaic layer was underneath the Roman layer, and it wasn't that deep. So yeah, they got it out by, taking those, how they scoop up in the leather, about a gallon-size leather bag, and then, get 100 people and they cart the sand off, and then they sift the sand, and then they found some artifacts. But they're from a completely different time frame.
Well, and I guess where my brain is going is, you say we have these enclosures that are bigger than a house, and some of them are as big as an Olympic-sized swimming pool. And so I'm trying to wrap my mind around, okay, but if it's all in sand, then the sand wouldn't make a solid structure. So is it actually, in the bedrock, under the rock, or did they construct walls to make the enclosures? Is that making sense?
Yeah, well, without going and excavating, it's impossible to say. We've got the scan that's indicating with great precision where things are and what's in what room and how big they are and the actual size of the cavities. Now, I don't know how it can be in bedrock. I think they constructed the walls. I think it was always underground. That's just my intuition, and again, we'd have to verify that. But what was described by Herodotus is that the roof, and he said 1,500 rooms. Maybe that's whatever. I don't know what kind of measure he was using or how he would have known, because he doesn't ever claim to have been in the lower level. But he said that the ceiling was constructed of a single slab of stone. Well, okay, how does that work? And then below the bottom, the ground level of the top layer, it's another 20 meters deeper for the ceiling of the one below it. And so these two layers don't intersect at all. It's not like snakes and ladders where you'd see a descending passageway, for example. I personally don't think it's the bedrock. I think somehow they constructed it, and then there's sand in between, and then there's the other level. So this would be more like I think the way it possibly could be excavated is like those sand removal equipment machines that vacuum, like they used in Dubai. They had a barge, and then they put the sand equipment underneath the water and pulled some sand out, and then went and made islands by spewing the sand in a different location. So I think that sand removal equipment, for example, when a sand dune forms over a road, a desert road in Egypt, they vacuum it eventually and clear the road. So that's the sort of thing that I think would, but if they were having guys with baskets, the 1-gallon baskets, it would take 20 years. Take thousands of people 20 years to excavate. There's so much sand. It's so deep and it's so big.
And so there are 2 layers to the site, or we know about 2 layers, and there are 2 more layers that are more archaic.
Yep. There's 4 layers in all.
Okay.
Now, what we have to understand.
But we have awareness of 2, the Roman and the Ptolemaic, but not so much the other 2 that are in there.
No one has had any idea until this scan was done. Now, this technology is relatively new and it's state of the art, and it's like going from a 1 megapixel camera, like when the digital cameras first came out, to a 1,000 megapixel camera. This thing can even detect precious jewels, like a diamond. It's that high resolution and it's that precise. And so it's working with live feed satellites, and it's a software application that is a standing longitudinal wave signature for each element. So it's a different software program. They do the full scan to see if there's pottery. They do the full scan to see where water is, and they keep on going. There's one for gas, there's one for oil, but Klaus and his friend don't like using that because that's disruptive to Mother Earth. But so when people hear about this, they think, well, I've never heard about that, so it can't be true. Well, you know what? There is new technology, and it's little known, and it's only in the last few years that, Klaus has been able to work with governments around the world that are like even California, looking for underground rivers because of the drought. And so they have located at 170 meters deep an underground river under California. And then they go and they verify in various places. There's new pyramids being found in the Philippines. The entrance to the Bosnian pyramids was found with precision. A very interesting Egyptian find in Australia. So the people go to the site and they can't find the entrance, and they contact Klaus, and he says this is exactly where it is. And there's a device that they use in the field that's even more precise. So when this technology was first developed, they had no way of really knowing how reliable the information was because they hadn't gone to the field to test. But as the years go by, Klaus has some 200 sacred sites that they've scanned, and there's governments around the world that aren't as restrictive as Egypt, and they're actually going, and where they suspect there's water and the flow rate and all that is turning out to be precise. And so it seems that this is really, really an extraordinary thing that's going on. Now, the other feature is most ground-penetrating radar, once you hit something, you can't look through it. This technology allows you to look through as many layers as there are.
How far down will it penetrate?
6 kilometers. Like, we're talking deep, deep, deep into the earth.
Well, and I'm going in my mind, okay, so a kilometer is kind of like a mile, but not quite a mile. So if it's 6, we're talking about like definitely more than, a few miles, which is huge.
It's 5/8 of a mile, so it's probably something like 4 miles deep.
That's still huge.
It's huge.
I mean, I'm thinking 60 feet, that's pretty good. That's pretty deep. But several miles, that's...
Yeah. It's amazing. It's amazing. So they found gold in Bolivia, water in Zimbabwe, diamonds in Brunei. And then they go and they dig and they find at the level and in the precise volumes of what this scan is saying, is showing. So a metaphor for it is barcodes on at the grocery store, where they can program uniquely the size of the package, the flavor, the color, whatever. And so you beep, and so the way that barcode scanning technology works is the closest thing in a layman's term to this signature for each element. And so you don't just scan the whole thing and get everything all at once. You've got to scan precisely for the signature of the element.
But it would almost be kind of like using like a infrared versus a thermal imaging versus some other, you're not really measuring the same thing, but you're getting a different data set using different technology. Anyway.
That's an excellent point, because carbon-14 dating is looking for organic material and the rate at which it breaks down. But carbon-14 itself breaks down at about 30,000 years. And the other thing is it's easily contaminated. So a lot of times when people do carbon-14 date, in fact, they sent one sample to 14 different labs and ended up with 14 dates. To me, carbon-14 is completely unreliable. And when you suspect that something's very, very old, you need a different dating technology. So Klaus has been working with thermoluminescent dating, thermo and photoluminescent dating. And someone like Michael Cremo, that's finding bones that are over 1 million years old, is working with potassium argon dating. And there's other techniques, like it can tell the last time something was heated to an excessive heat, which is the kind of thing, if you found pottery, you'd use that dating technique, and then you could tell when that pottery was fired.
Well, and it seems like with these new technologies coming online, surprisingly, the dating seems to get pushed back and back and back.
Right. And carbon-14 makes everything look younger, and when you're using different dating techniques, it gets pushed back, unless the lab itself is corrupt, in that in Peru, and in the Quran and the Bible and history, nothing's supposed to be older than 6,000 years. And so Klaus actually sent a sample to a lab in Peru, and they kept it for over a year. And then he called them up, and they said, yeah, you can come and get it. And they said, you know what, we're not going to charge you. And by the way, the sample's like 5,280 years old. Well, he knew there's no way it's that old. And so when they got the real number, the people at the lab decided they weren't going to tell him. So they gave it back and didn't charge him, because this disrupts history. And I've seen carbon-14 dating the certificate from the Bosnian pyramids between the third and the fourth course of the exterior of the pyramid, and it's dated to 38,000 years ago. And now in Indonesia, they've just dated a place called Ganang Penang, I don't know how to say the word, Padang. Too many G's in the word. And I'm invited to go there in December to be a guest host on the trip. I better learn how to say it. But they've dated that pyramid to 23,000 years old.
I love it when the dates keep going back. I love it, love it, love it, love it.
Yeah.
So the scans, do they indicate whether we're talking about square rooms with regular surfaces versus something that, and I'm going to say, could be construed as a natural underground chamber?
Impossible that it's natural. Absolutely impossible. Now, the other thing is they called it the labyrinth. Now, labyrinths are notoriously, circular, and they've got, various configurations. And apparently the person who built the labyrinth in the Minoan culture at Knossos on Crete visited this site before they built the labyrinth there. And the other thing is that there was, in 1671, a copper engraving was copied from something down there. Kircher did this. And it's amazing, full of symbols, and it looks like biology and cosmology and astrology. And in the center is a square that has a labyrinth in it. But all at once, this symbol is a pyramid, it's the brain, and it's a labyrinth. And they found a way to depict three distinct things in one symbol. So we're talking something very curious here, and nobody's ever seen anything like it before. So these rooms are rectangular and square. Some of the wider passageways seem to curve, but they're different too. The red level is different than the blue level, which leads, and because it's so much deeper, it leads me to think that's two distinct civilizations as well. The same way as you'd see the Ptolemaic doesn't mix with the Roman. They're, a lot of years apart.
You were saying that this imagery provides a much higher resolution than we had before with ground penetrating radar. Is it possible to zoom in on any of the individual rooms and see any details inside, or is it just giving us more shape and layout?
Shape and elements. And so there are 6 chambers and this includes both levels with gold. And so that leads me to believe it hasn't been opened before. Otherwise, that gold would be gone. But it's so deep, I don't think anybody would have guessed what's possibly down there. And it also leads me to believe that it was meant not to be found. And so, yeah, and I don't even know if we're going to, get the permits. Certainly, there are exceptions for this site, and it seems that there are vested interests in being able to excavate it. But it's not easy to get anything done in Egypt, and Ramadan just finished, and so it could be that we get the ball rolling again. But this, even if we don't, I got the film permits to the rights to the filming, working with this particular team, and my vested interest is to not hide it from humanity. So to be able to, film it so that if the powers that be want to hide it, that we've already got the footage and we've, uploaded it, and so we don't know, but I think that it's humanity's right to know that something like this exists and to speculate. Now, the first step would be to drill boreholes at least 3 inches across, and then we could send a high-definition camera with an LED light down and rotate and film and do a 3D mapping that can then show us, even without excavating, what's in there. Now, it could be that the walls are gold and gilded, and it could be that there's gold objects in it, right? We don't know. But that's the thing. We can't pretend to know. This is a very good hypothesis. It's a very good beginning to what could be down there. But until we go in the field and verify it with the more precise instruments, we'll never know.
But that's the part that's exciting, because it is so new that we're all going to have the opportunity, crossing our fingers and toes and putting out really good energy on it, that we'll get to see this whole thing unfold and kind of travel along with a discovery like this.
Well, and that would be really nice, because we were talking GoPros and quadcopters and taking a photograph every 5 minutes and doing it in such a way that no one could hide what they're finding and take it away, and that we could keep people post it on what we're finding live. Why not? If they'll allow it. But there's been so much hidden from humanity that it seems that that's what governments do, is they find things and hide them. And so maybe we're on a slippery slope with that, but that's my vision, is as we find it, you can see it.
Well, you just have to sit there and go, oh, well, we only think it's, like 1,500 years old, or 1,500 BC. Yeah, that's it. It's from 1,500 BC. It's not that old. But there's a pyramid on that site. What's the relationship do you think the relationship is between the pyramid and the structures? I mean, because it's mud brick and it doesn't appear like it's really that old.
Well, mud brick pyramid in Egypt, the higher quality technology is older, and the more recent has smaller bricks and is not very good construction. So this mud brick, when it rains, starts to dissolve. And so they actually call it the weeping pyramid, because it kind of has rivulets going through where the water has eroded and then there's quite a lot of concern that this pyramid is getting damaged in a way that it can't be repaired. But to me, it seems like a completely different construction. So underneath, there are passageways, and there is a pyramid. It could be that there's another pyramid that's buried that's even deeper, and this is the one on top. So again, we won't know, but there's and that's the thing. I'm always looking at layers and ages. And so, these different layers, I mean, people kept returning to this site. So this pyramid is not in very good shape, and there is water inside it, but there's no water inside these chambers on either level. There's water underneath the lower level. And not much. I call them puddles. Because of the canal, at first, the two teams that were researching in 2008, they were concerned that the chambers were full of water, because there was water in the pyramid, but they had no way of checking it. So they had pledged $2.5 million to, quote unquote, move the canal. Well, how do you move a canal? Like, that's quite a big undertaking, right? And so, but it's not necessary to move it if the water is not in there. So it's almost like somebody was kind of putting a decoy over the top, and at the end of Flinders Petrie's research, he said, oh no, don't go dig there because it's full of water, and so you'll never find anything anyway. And, I think he did, he was there before. Archaeology didn't start till 1910, and he was there in 1890. He did 1881 to 1891, 10 years of digging in Egypt is the book. And, so he basically was protecting it in that way, and when Louis de Belfond put the canal, this is an irrigation canal for the farms around it. And the other thing is that when you look at the satellite scan, you can see the chambers are as big as the farmers' fields. You know how crops change color. Mm-hmm. And, it's as big as a field. It's like, excuse me? Why do they need them so big? And why don't they connect? The other thing is that, like Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, that's dated at 13,000 years, which I think is older. It was at the top of the hill. It was decommissioned, very much like the Bosnian pyramids, as though they knew the flood was coming. And so they wanted to preserve the temple, so they filled it with rubble. They filled the Bosnian pyramid tunnels with rubble, and now they're both being excavated. But, there seems to be evidence that no one lived at Göbekli Tepe. There was 22 temples. I think one has been excavated. I haven't been. I was on my way and didn't make it. But so they're not dwellings. And I think the absence of pottery at this site means they weren't, it's one of the things that would point to them not being dwellings. Now, at Cappadocia in Turkey, there was, thousands and thousands of people that could live underground. Now, maybe there was some kind of solar activity that was preventing people from living above the ground or living on the surface. But I don't think that's what this is, because the chambers don't connect. They seem to be isolated units, almost like storage units. They don't seem to connect.
And you don't think that there is a connection with water, that it was some kind of power piece. You know how there's the belief that, with the pyramids, there's always this water source associated with them because it helps to energize the pyramid. You don't think that that's the case in this location, that there's these chambers, but it's a water thing too?
No, because of the nature of that, and that's a very good question. Now, Dr. Sam talks about Osmanagich from the Bosnian pyramids, but 7 different characteristic features that have to work with straight-sided pyramids if they're going to be energy machines. And that's zigzag passageways underneath, a source of water underneath, the rising and falling of water levels, and straight-sided, and chambers within, built with quartz under pressure, and it goes on like that. That's not what we've got here. And I'm really sensitive to that information. So this is not a power plant. It's not an underground city. It seems to be isolated chambers. I think it's a repository. Now, I know that Atlantis had 3 different catastrophes, and I think that the second and third ones they were able to predict what was going on, which is why something like Göbekli Tepe would have been decommissioned and that sort of thing, where they had prior knowledge. And so if they did, and they had all this technology and all these people, how would they have protected that? So, and there seems to have been enough warning to go and colonize other places on the planet, which could be why we're finding pyramids all over the world now that are covered with trees. Because if the straight-sided pyramids were there before the flood, silt would have been left as the water receded, which would have been enough soil to actually root trees. And so when you look across the countryside, you would never think it's a straight-sided pyramid because all the trees are different heights. And that's what we find in Bosnia. There's one in Serbia. There's some in South Africa. They're all over the world. They're finding these kinds of pyramids. Now, it happens that Giza has no trees on it because it's desert and the sand blew away.
Because there's no trees.
Because there's no trees, but there used to be. So in times past, as you probably saw in the Pyramid Code, it used to be tropical. And so we're all locked into the last 6,000 years thinking everything that we're finding is from that epoch. And that's why it's so challenging to put the pieces of the puzzle together, because we're talking about a completely different time frame.
If you were to throw out a guess, where would you place these lower 2 levels? Date-wise.
Okay, a guess. And
we'll take it as a guess.
We'll take it as a guess, okay, because it's a hypothesis, but it fits with things that I've been looking for. So I think the blue level, the upper of the 2, is a repository from Atlantis. I would suspect that there would be equipment, technology, records, and that's what it said in this document that I became aware of in 1996. But they were connecting it to Giza. I think the lower level is even older than that, and it could even be, and this sounds really, okay, I'm going to say it, when we arrive from off-planet, there's people who are having visions of places, and I put this together without telling them what I already know, 450,000 years ago. Well, that's a date that's resonating with Sitchin and the Anunnaki. Not that Sitchin's research was thorough and completely correct, but something happened. There was, disclosure hasn't happened in the States. They're still hiding the records, but there was some interface between star beings and Earth beings and some kind of colonization from off-planet, and we haven't really come up with anything that would verify that. And so, yes, there's art, and there's things that Chariot of the Gods has pointed out, and we're terribly curious about all this. Some people are, some people aren't. But it could be the orientation chambers that when they first came into the density of the Earth plane, they had to make some adjustments in order to be able to function if they were coming from off-planet. So the size of these chambers may have something to do with the technology that's in them, the reorientation to being on the planet, some kind of a, halfway house between the two. And then once they adjusted, they could come above ground and continue.
Well, I feel like with those beings in particular, had issues with daylight, sunshine. Anyway, moving on. Got things flying around over here. So it sounds like even with Zahi Hawass being gone, things really haven't changed in Egypt. That much.
Well, that's a sweeping statement because having gone there,
correct me then.
Well, yes and no. Okay, having gone there in April, I noticed, and we're staying right off Tahrir Square, and the energy was extremely positive. And we know that the media doesn't, report things accurately, and the people there felt quite energized by the whole revolution, even though we still have governments doing the same thing. So government offices haven't changed. I did meet the new Zahi, and I'm in touch with him on Skype regularly. And Zahi himself is just taken a job, apparently, doing a restoration of the Suez Canal, which I find interesting because of the association with Hawara and the guy who built the Suez Canal. Zahi himself never went to Hawara. He would, bark long and hard about there being nothing there, as he did with the underground passageways at Giza that I spent 5 years in and out of, that Klaus has a scan that shows the precision of what's down there. And so, it's like applying for a research grant, to a government office, or applying for a PhD. There's a lot of red tape. There's a lot of steps to take. There's rules. It has to be done correctly. The various roles of the archaeologist, principal investigator, and all that has to be precise. And I've applied for and gotten 3 of these grants through the Ministry of Education in Taiwan, so I understand the rigor of that. And I've applied for PhDs several times as well. So, it's not for the layperson to just say, I want to go dig there because, I'm somebody and therefore you should let me. It's far more scientific and precise than that in terms of the reports and, how the protocol goes, and respecting, the Egyptian authorities and how all that works. And so I don't think many governments have changed very much, but there is a new group. There's a new wave coming through, and nobody's going to be just like Zahi Hawass.
So you've been to the location in Hawara. I want to say it right. Physically been there.
Uh-huh.
All right,
I went
so
there
I'm
in
going to
April.
ask.
I climbed to the top of the pyramid, and to my amazement, there's another pyramid about 20 miles away. And as you saw in the pyramid code, every pyramid site, you can see the next site. And so there's another series of pyramids there.
Okay, so here's my question. That is cool, but here's my question, and you're the only person I would ask that. So what was your vibe of the area? What were you feeling or picking up? Because I'm sure you were kind of like checking in while you were there, or sitting on the top of the pyramid. That'd be a great spot.
Well, I get it that there's something down there, and it's quite an isolated site. Like the watchmen can go for weeks and weeks without a single person coming there. So I think it's entirely possible that there's stuff that we have never seen before that we couldn't even conceive. And as we've been making the plans and measuring the site and collecting some data just from the scan itself, and a little trepidation kind of went through me about, like, well, what if what we find, if we get to do it, is what we find is really, really strange, and we've never seen anything like it. Because that's what seemed to be indicated from that document from 1996. It wasn't written. It was an ancient text. It wasn't written in 96. Because they were finding, like, cogs in a machine, things that looked like computer disks, but bigger. And the other thing was that it's like light keys, where as the team approached in this document from ancient times, the stone moved with, abracadabra kind of mantra, and then they went down, 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 down. Everything was dusty and dank. It sounded terrible. And then when they approached this place, all of a sudden everything was clean. As they moved forward, the place was illuminated, and it was, it was almost like their presence was lighting it up. And I've heard of that before. They do call it light keys in the literature. And so, this is very strange, and it's not something we're doing now. But, in terms of the high-level initiates, where they had the command of the transmutation of the atom, they were able to do bilocation, teleportation, telepathy, alchemy, manifestation, all of that. And so, we're not talking about the recent past of us now in the limited way we think of things, right? And again,
well, exactly. I mean,
school and religion wants us to think that this is all we have.
And I find it so interesting because our mentality toward that whole part of ourselves has been so washed out of us, and I don't know what happened. And that's my new little research project, is trying to connect the dots of why we changed.
Well, in my mind, because my research, my original research question before angels and archetypes and evolutionary math of feminine consciousness was, if we had matriarchal cultures that gave way to patriarchy, what happened? How did we go from being peaceable, non-warring, community-oriented, leaving more for the children, respecting the earth, respecting elders, to this, blood from death instead of blood from life? And so we've lost a lot in terms of, now I think, and I've said it before, that I think the agenda of the patriarchy has been to erase evidence of everything other than itself.
Well, yeah. So?
Yeah, so that's why we can't remember. That's why we don't know what came before it. Now, there's
But I
fragments of
also
knowledge.
think that it's just so old that we forgot. We
Yes,
don't
but
talk about it because it's not important. And
Well,
we
it's
forgot.
important. Of course it's important, but we systemically have been trained to forget. In school, we're told what to think, not how to think. And so this is, if you look at David Icke and, talking about mind control and keeping people traumatized through visions of things that, are terrifying, and beheadings and all that, and then you make a suggestion and people go, okay, and they just believe it. And so, this has been a long, slow deterioration of high states of consciousness.
And I just asked the question, what's the end game? What's the frickin' end game?
Well, to have us all enslaved and on our knees and, desperate.
But they had us there before.
Well, I know, but that's why I think that it's dangerous to say the Anunnaki had us all enslaved, because what's the supposition there is that we're not enslaved now. And I feel from past life work and from just what's going on in my cellular memory that we really had a very peaceful, glorious, utopian kind of planet where people actually did get along, and it was healthy and creative and all of that. And we've really departed from that. I mean, people's brain power is slowed right down. People got like a 2-minute attention span. It's like...
Well, we've been trained to do that, though. We've been trained to have that short attention span. We get enough drugs. We sit on the sofa and watch TV. We eat crappy food. We don't move around or do anything. And we become little slugs.
Well, and and that's not so threatening. But there's a whole movement. There's a lot of people who are hanging on to, the message in the pyramid code and other things. There's a lot of people who are very, very interested in this material. Now, we've also lost our way in terms of how to do research correctly, and that's a platform that I stand on because I taught research methods at the grad level for years. And I think it's important to give credit where credit is due and look around. Now, a lot of ancient texts are printed online. Today, I saw something where the Vatican has released 4,000 ancient documents.
I know.
Online. Oh, my God.
But none of them are in English, but that's okay. Someone will translate them. But
well, that's okay is right. I mean, if they weren't written in English, that doesn't give them to me anyway.
That's right. You were mentioning this ancient text that talked about the chamber and stuff. Do you know what the name of the text is? And is that one online in English?
Well, it's in English. It's Chelsea Floor who gave it to me, and it had no cover page. And I had a photocopy of it, and this was way back, 96, so I don't have it anymore, and I do not know the name of it, and it may be there. But it makes me realize, though, when things like this, all they had to do is say, it's at the Great Pyramid, and nobody'd find what they're looking for, right? Because they just deviate and say, don't look over here, look over there. Like a magician, doing the trick with the left hand, and really the right hand is doing the part that they don't want you to see. So, no, I don't have that information.
Okay. See, I like reading stuff like that. I feel like a weirdo, but I like reading that kind of material.
Well, yeah, and I've read most of the ancient texts and, given it 10 years and then read them again. And, a lot of things. I did it 3 times over a 30-year period of time. And a lot of things are really kind of cryptic. And we have to have some kind of wherewithal in order to be able to get the crumb of information that we're looking for. So yeah, it's a long process to go through this. So people say, oh, you got that, fine. Tell me which ancient text I should read. But just like anything, you can read a lot and most of it's wrong, and then you pick up a crumb. It's like, and so this thing of learning to be able to discern, what's accurate and what isn't, and how to tell the difference is the task. So it's not just getting access to the books. It's how to work your way through it, because the guidebook for, our distant past has not been created, and I don't think it's likely to be created. It's just too complex, and it's too much of a mystery. It's the best mystery we've got, though.
But many times you read a text and then you continue in your research, and then for some reason you end up circling back to it, and the knowledge you gained as you move forward, you come back and go, oh, now that makes sense. Where
I know exactly what you mean.
Before it was like, okay, whatever, moving on.
Yeah, what is all this stuff? And the other thing is, it seems like it's full of contradictions. Well, so is the news. Watch the news for 10 minutes, and it's full of contradictions. And that's cognitive dissonance, where your brain goes, well, that's contradicting the other thing. And then the commercial comes in, and, the idea is that you're going to go buy something because they mixed up your brain. So, to find, and the other thing is that, when people wrote these texts, they weren't necessarily that aware. It was squarely within the patriarchal era, which is all about power over and thinking that the Egyptians were kind of infantile and misguided. And maybe that's not how it was at all. But we're piecing it together. Collaboratively, people are bringing their puzzle pieces, and there's, lots of people that I've been interviewed by, and now I am interviewing because I have a Interactive View TV show 2 hours a week on Conscious Consumer Network. And, there's people with, large bodies of work that have done credible research. There's a lot of people standing on stage at the speaker circuit that have not done credible research. But as long as that's encouraged and people give credit where credit is due, we are marching our way toward a deeper understanding. And some people have led us down the garden path and given us stuff that's misleading. But by and large, I think we're really getting there.
And I will agree. I had a whole conversation on Facebook with this guy talking about researchers that will put out information, and in my opinion, the people that he was naming, and I'm not going to name the names, but the people he was naming I found were credible researchers. And so I was like, he goes, but they're not staying with the status quo. And they're ruining their careers because they're putting out this stuff that there's no evidence for. That there's no evidence for. And it's like, well, just because there's no evidence doesn't say that their research or their theories are wrong or incorrect. And, the history has been, there's what the system says, and then there's anybody that says something outside the system, and they're all of a sudden, crazy.
Yeah, and that's how they want it. And that the term conspiracy theorist is one of those catch-all phrases, like public relations, which I just described the cognitive dissonance, and then they, give you a product. Conspiracy theorist is a garbage pail for anybody who doesn't agree with the powers that pretend and the story on the media and what they say in school, and they just toss the whole person into this garbage can and call them a conspiracy theorist. But because you got a PhD, that anybody who is quote-unquote a theorist has had to do research for up to 10 years and come up with something original, demonstrate it over and over again scientifically, and then they get to have their own theory. Well, in 1 nanosecond, somebody gets to be a conspiracy theorist, so it's obviously a fabricated term that's meant to just keep people in the collective drinking the Kool-Aid. And so, but the thing is now, I think with alternative media, shows like yours and a number of others, there's a growing movement of people who, and even the millennials, kids who were born after the year 2000, they watch TV, they know it's garbage. They're often vegetarian because they don't think they should be eating their friends, and it's it's just something that a lot of us have been indoctrinated into, and some of us are just not buying it anymore. So I say let's put a firewall between the naysayers and the rest of us, and work together to make sense of something that we're getting really close to understanding.
Well, and you bring up a really great point. I remember being a little kid, there were all the, women's libbers and bra burners and so by the time I was moving into my maturity, it was like, I just assumed I was equal, and then as I've gotten older, I've seen, the whole gay and lesbian concept where, back in the day, you still stayed in the closet, and now you go to a high school and you ask the teenagers, are you gay? And they'll openly say yes or no. And not, so it's changing. And so there's this whole generation or multiple that are being brought up with the concept of, well, maybe what we're being told in school isn't right.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think
the education system's really doing a lot of damage. So I see that with Interactive U when people come and they're all shut down, their self-esteem is low, and school really it does more damage than good, if you ask me.
Exactly. But, they don't really teach anybody. I mean, they teach them some stuff. I don't know. I'm not even going to get off on a whole big tangent about education because it's scary and sickening. What we see
That's
happening.
The word. It's sickening.
Because, they're getting educated, but if you compare what they're being taught to what was taught 30 years ago, 40 years ago, whatever, it's like a fraction of the information. And now you can get your associate's degree while you're still in high school because you can take college courses in high school. It's like, really? Whatever.
Well,
okay.
Also, they're still teaching memorizing facts. And the banking system of education, where the teacher deposits the information to the student, then they give it back on the test. But you've got a smartphone. All the information is right there. You can look up the facts. Why do you have to memorize them?
But then in other areas like math, it's like they just teach them how to use the calculator, and it doesn't make them have to memorize. I mean, I think that there in certain areas, there is a place for memorization. And I can't imagine having to whip out a calculator every time I needed to add something together or to do a quick division problem because I never learned how to do it.
Oh, I know. Oh, no, there's big problems. Definitely big problems. But the worst one being boring kids. And you can't walk down, you finish your work, you can't go down the hall until the bell rings. All of this is modeled on jail. The people who build jails build schools. I mean, it's just appalling. And it just doesn't work for kids to have to sit there. I mean, it's not natural for young children to have to sit in rows and be still. So, yeah, there's tons of problems there. But
I think that, there are so many parents that are choosing to homeschool, or there are, from what I understand, some collectives of people that are taking turns homeschooling little groups of kids. So I feel like society is like people are kind of rounding up around themselves, and that it's not just school, that people are saying, I need to take care of ourselves, become more sustainable, become more self-sufficient, which includes education, which includes, well, I'll just have my thoughts and let big government be over there. We live in very interesting times.
They make it illegal in Germany to do homeschooling. And then there's unschooling.
Are you kidding me?
No. And it's illegal in some states as well. Okay, so homeschooling is taking the curriculum that's taught at school, and instead of teaching it in 6 hours, you teach it in shorter periods of time because there's not so many interruptions. But it's still the curriculum at school, and you still go and do the tests. Unschooling is letting a child follow their passion, study, sea otters in a kayak and film it and then change their mind about what they want to do next. And then world schooling is a new one where parents will take their kids on a sailboat around the world or traveling at length or climbing Mount Kilimanjaro and see what they can learn on these adventure projects. And so there's lots of ways to do this. There's a program in Interactive U called Interactive School for Kids, which is basically support for parents who are homeschooling their kids.
Wow, I didn't even know there were so many options. But again, you have to be willing, like we've been talking about earlier, to step outside of the box, to step outside of the system, to take the blinders off and go, what do I believe? What do I think? Where am I going? And taking the responsibility back on yourself instead of giving it up to somebody else, just like our history, just like our monuments, like everything we're experiencing today.
Absolutely. Touché.
Well, all right. Okay, so you're going to laugh, but I got a call from Bruce Cunningham yesterday, and he said, and make sure you have Carmen talk about the trip to Indonesia. Yeah. In Indonesia. So where are you going? What's going on?
Okay, so Bruce has invited me to be a guest host, and there's never been a sacred site journey to this site. It's one of the most recent discoveries, and Graham Hancock has gone there and done some investigating. They have actually found a pyramid there that they've dated to 23,000 years ago. And so the head archaeologist will be available to us on this trip. And then we're also going to Borobudur, which is a temple in Indonesia that's really, really quite spectacular. They say it's not that old, but it must be built on a more ancient site because it's definitely got the energy. And then there's these statues that have the pointed fingers resting on the belly like you see on Easter Island. You see in Bolivia at Tiwanaku. You see at Göbekli Tepe, and you see that here as well. And so this tour is organized by Ancient Mysteries International. Everybody's welcome to come. It's extremely good value because in Asia you can do 4-star. It doesn't have to be 5-star like in Egypt. Egypt's pretty grungy if you're not in the 5 stars. But so it's really, really good value. It's not that expensive. Even flights out of the San Francisco LA on the west coast to Jakarta are quite reasonable. And so Bruce has done a really nice job of pulling that trip together. So I hope people take an interest in it, and you can contact him or me about that. And that's November 28th to December 6th.
And we have like 1 minute, so let me ask you, because you have a big conference that you're going to be speaking at in Canada, is that, or has that happened? Okay,
no, it's August 29th and 30th. Now, the Modern Knowledge Tour goes straight across Canada, starting on the East Coast. They did it last year, and I spoke in Vancouver. This year, they're adding Victoria. And so I'll be on stage in Vancouver August 29th, Victoria August 30th, with Michael Cremo, who I can't wait to meet, Nassim Haramein, and Marty Leeds, all of which I'm very keen to speak with. And so each city has got different speakers. It's called Modern Knowledge Tour 2015. It's organized by David Whitehead and Chris Russick, who do an excellent job. And it really gathers like-minded people. I was quite impressed with the audience when I spoke last year, because there's no convincing. You don't have to tell people, why they should think differently. They already do. They're like, now what? So it seems that this year is far more solution-oriented, and last year was a little bit more, okay, we're in a mess. This is the kind of mess we're in. But no, it's really, really strong in terms of who connects, and it really is creating a community across the country. And I've got people coming up from the States for it. So I'm very pleased to be speaking at this conference.
Cool. Carmen, our time is up, so I'm going to have to let you go, but thank you so much for coming on and sharing this information. And when you get like some new updates or information, please let me know so we can get you scheduled back on and keep us up to date.
I certainly will. It's been a pleasure to talk to you.
Okay, bye, Carmen.
Bye-bye, Rita.
That's Carmen Boulter. Her website is pyramidcode.com. And next week, we're going to be speaking with C.M. Mayo about the secret book of Francisco Madero. And in the second hour with Juan Milo Duquette.
Join host Dr. Rita Louise each week at this time for Just Energy